Well, I think we're still in the morning, so I will say good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming today. This is a very exciting program. My name is Dr. Janice Thomas. I am Director of the International Education Center here at Brookdale Community College. And this is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for us to collaborate with our brand new Wellness Center, and you're going to hear a little bit about the Wellness Center from one of our opening speakers. But I do want to tell you about the International Education Center. Our vision is a community where there are global and intercultural dimensions of learning infused into every aspect of life here at the college. And one of the ways that we do that is to promote and support co-curricular programming. And one of those programs is the Global Citizenship Distinction. It is an academic recognition program open to any major at the college, regardless of grade point average. And through this experience, students participate in global opportunities. They participate in global activities such as this one. They create global activities such as this one. They take courses that have been infused with global issues or courses that fulfill the cultural global dimension as part of their gen ed requirements. And at the conclusion of these experiences, after having curated an e-portfolio, the students graduate as Global Distinction Scholars. So you will hear from the coordinator of that program at the conclusion, but we encourage any student here who's interested in the GCD program to please contact our office or the faculty coordinator, Dr. Raj Wesley. I do want to thank the Wellness Center for partnering with us and partnering with the students who are involved in the Global Citizenship Distinction Program. Thank our colleagues from Speech, from the History Department, and from the Criminal Justice Department for supporting our students. And just quickly before I pass the podium on, we do have some additional events for the rest of this semester. Later tonight, there is a program, Navigating Employment for Undocumented Students, that will be at 7 p.m. in the Student Life Center. Next week, continuing in the wellness theme, we're partnering with our CVA gallery, and there's a living room conversations, discussions on the Anthropocene. And then we are partnering with our folks from the Haitian community, honoring Clinton Crocker with the 8th Annual Clinton Crocker Memorial Lecture, and that is also partnered with the Wellness Center, and the topic of that lecture will be mental health issues within the Haitian community and understanding those issues and understanding that support. So I would like to turn it over now to Ms. Morena, who is from the Global Citizenship Distinction Program.
Hi, thank you for being here. My name is Morena. I am a poli-sci major, and I'm also part of the Global Citizenship Distinction Program. And this program was so important because it gave me the chance to actually plan this debate and to talk about topics that really affect us. The Global Citizenship Distinction Program is something that aims to bring awareness to the students, as well as make them a member of their community, but also a member of a global community. So really being enhanced with problems that touch upon everybody. And I also wanted to briefly thank you, everybody who made this possible, all the professor, all my professors. Thank you so much for being here, all of you. And thank you to Brookdale Community College. This is such an important message to let us students know that we count, that we can make a difference, and that we really need to speak up about something that it's on everybody. So thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Thomas. And I want to give the microphone to Patrick, and so he can say some words about the Wellness Center. So thank you so much.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Patrick Sforskis. I'm the coordinator to the Wellness Center. Thank you so much for joining us today for this exciting event. It is an honor to provide you a little introduction for our discussion today. And I thank the GCP and everyone involved for collaborating with the Wellness Center to bring this event to light today. Wellness is a holistic, multi-dimensional concept that encompasses various aspects of our lives. At the Wellness Center, we really pride ourselves in providing resources and programs, such as this one that explore those dimensions. And we really try to act as a tool to enhance these dimensions in the lives of our students, our employees, and the community. One crucial element to that is intellectual wellness, the stimulation of our minds. This could be through exploration, critical thinking, exposure to diverse ideas, communities, and cultures. It is through the exchange of ideas and exploration of different perspectives and the freedom to access information that we nourish our intellectual well-being. Now, consider the impact of book bans and the dimensions of wellness. When certain books are deemed unfit or controversial or subsequently banned, our intellectual well-being is compromised. The restrictions of information limits our abilities to engage with diverse thoughts and perspectives, hindering our intellectual growth and understanding of the world. The social dimension of wellness is likewise impacted. In a society that values freedom of expression and open dialogue, book bans could create divisions. They could foster an environment where open discussions are replaced by censorship and where the exchange of ideas is stifled. But perhaps that is just the start, and one view that does not tell the entire story. As you have heard in this event today, we will hear different perspectives to the book ban and the efforts on wellness. We invite you to actively listen, actively participate, and lend your voices to this conversation. Thank you, and without further ado, let us discuss.
So now we're introducing our moderator, Professor Barbara Barron.
Good morning, all. And I have to say, I've been at Brookdale a very long time, and I definitely remember when this was the old bookstore. Pretty vibrant place where students went around and it was almost a maze in here. And having said that, I'm amazed at how beautiful it looks in its new iteration. It really is a special place, and it's very heartwarming to see a combination of both faculty and students here to participate. In a college where everyone commutes, it's hard to do this. It's hard to gather people and to get people to buy into this. But in the spirit of debate, as you just mentioned, we're going to hear two sides of an issue. If you were taking public speaking with me, we would always contemplate the why not? How come people wouldn't agree with me that? And you'll hear first from people who are opposed to book banning, and then you'll hear some people that think it's a positive view. While you're listening, I'm hoping that in your minds you will come up perhaps with some questions that you might ask. In a debate forum, it is absolutely positively okay to challenge and to find out how people might respond to those challenges. And it's not an insult. In any kind of persuasive forum, we agree to disagree. And certainly in an educational forum, that's what we expect. So we do have a combination of a faculty member and a student who will bring different perspectives. We're first going to hear from Professor Semeka from history and from Kai Antoine, right? Antone, I apologize. I just did the worst thing that I could do with public speaking, but I only got his name a moment ago. And each of you will have 6 minutes to speak, all right? I need to somehow position myself somewhere. I will give you a hand signal. I'll tell you when you have 2 minutes to go, 1 minute to go, 30 seconds, and last 5. So what I may do is just bring my chair here so that you can see me from the side, rather than my sitting across from you. And the same thing will happen. We'll hear from both of you. I'll make a few comments. We'll hear from the other side. And again, those of you who are in the audience, you'll be watching. And if you are going to make any kind of statement, we ask please that you would also go to the microphone. It's good for you to have experience speaking in a microphone. You don't want to get too close. You don't want to get too far. All right, you just kind of find your space, and then that will help you to be able to move ahead. And please do participate. That's what makes it fun. In a debate, we would vote. So if we're looking at the topic, do book bans affect intellectual wellness? I want you to simply have a thought of where you stand on that. Do book bans affect intellectual wellness? And that you already may be for that, against it, or middle of the road. So please do kind of just get a sense of where you stand without hearing both sides. And later, I'll ask you that question, and we're going to see if with what you hear, if your opinion is swayed. Everybody clear? what we're doing? Good. All right, so with that,
First of all, thank you so much for inviting us to talk about this really important topic. And the restriction of ideas in a free society is something that we always must keep in mind and to examine. The philosophy of the library profession is that free people should read freely. And so the power to select what people read is an extraordinary power in a free society. And so we're going to talk a little bit first about the history of book banning, and being the historian, I got that part of the debate. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the impact on people as well. We believe that in a free society, people should have access to different points of view, and that it's part of your First Amendment right to have access to different points of view and to not prevent people from being able to access books or ideas. Book banning has a long history. It goes all the way back to the very earliest civilizations. In China, in the 3rd century, the first emperor of China had 400 Chinese scholars buried alive and all the books burned in the library because he wanted to assure that he would be the beginning of Chinese history. He wanted to create and shape history. Censorship and book banning goes all the way back in time. The Roman Catholic Church also had books, lists of banned books that were forbidden to be read. Famously, the scientist Galileo was banned and was prevented from publishing his scientific findings on the universe. And even in early US history, back when the Puritans were in Massachusetts Bay, they banned Thomas Morton's book in the 1620s called The New English Canaan because Thomas Morton criticized the Puritans treatment of the of Native Americans, and he drank and danced. So the Puritans really thought he was dangerous to society. So in what would become the United States, even in the 17th century, there was book banning. So there's a really long history of book banning. In the last 5 years, there's been a real spike in incidents of challenges to books that don't always result in banning a book, but often do result in the banning of a book. So from July of 2021 through March of 2022, there were 1,586 different instances of individual books being banned, with Texas having the most. 713 books were banned in Texas. Pennsylvania came in second with 456 banned books. Florida last with 204 banned books. There was even one notable book burning. In Iowa, a man took out 4 books on LGBTQ themes from his public library and burned the books because he found them offensive. So why does this happen? Psychologists, sociologists believe that the reason that this happens is because society deals with a moral panic, that they believe that the book is evil and is a threat, that a book on Marxism could turn a child into a Marxist, a violent book could make someone violent, etc. And this is when a social problem really gets blown out of control and blown out of proportion and transforms into a threat to the survival of society itself and institutes fear.
Going off of that, we go into comic books, and in the 1950s, Congress tried to ban comic books because of their violent nature, and as you can see, the covers themselves were pretty violent in themselves, and they believed that this was causing children to become juvenile delinquents, and even psychologists were making a decent racket off of that as well. And this leads to another graphic novel that I was talking about, Mouse. This book was I don't know if it got banned. It was on the verge of being banned because of anti-Semitic messages that were being pushed, even though this book is actually from a Holocaust survivor's perspective about his grandfather going through the Holocaust. And this was really just a way to understand World War II from a more, not lighthearted perspective, but one that's more accessible to children and even teenagers, as, again, it's a graphic novel. And we see that most frequently the themes in banned books are the themes of the LGBTQ plus community, themes that explore sex, abortion, and teen pregnancy, puberty, race, and racism, with books being banned that cover the topics of critical race theory, and even Harry Potter, because the book contained spells and magic in general, which we were talking about Calvinism before, kind of, you know, that Puritan view of magic is deeply frowned upon. So, has anyone challenged bans? Absolutely. In 1982, in the Island Trees versus Pico case, a bunch of high schoolers found that a bunch of the books in their library were being banned. And they didn't like that, so they challenged the government, and they had declared that banning books is actually breaking the First Amendment by not allowing people to have access to literature. So this brings us to who bans books more, I guess, in a manner of speaking. I think, as I said about Mouse, and as we've heard about the LGBTQ book bans, neither side is innocent and neither side is morally right. Each side is radical in its own way. Mouse wanted to get banned for its anti-Semitic views, and which is more the leftist take, and the right wanted to ban the books with the more leftist takes. So
let me just say
yeah.
something here then. So there's no left versus right in this argument. The right wing of the political spectrum wants to ban and challenge books, and so does the left. So this, I think, adds a very interesting dimension to the discussion.
So Matt Krause, Texas State Representative, had a list of 850 books that contained themes involving LGBTQ+, were written by queer authors or BIPOC authors, and they were labeled as objectionable based on those themes alone, but it had also come out that he hadn't read a single one of those books. So it really isn't about banning content, it's about stopping the spread of ideas that differ from their own moral compass.
Matt Krause really represents the moral panic on the right, of the fear of content and ideas that tell stories of LGBTQ plus gender identity and sexual orientation. On the left, we also have seen efforts to challenge books like Of Mice and Men, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, and To Kill a Mockingbird, that these classics have been challenged because they use racist language, that they don't give a voice to the African American part of the story in the case of To Kill a Mockingbird. And so that we've seen that on both sides of the spectrum, these books are, have been challenged. So it's not just a right-wing issue, but it's both sides of the political spectrum.
In conclusion, you'll see these books up here, and if you look all the way to the right, you'll see one called The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. This book was going to be banned. Again, I'm not sure if it was or wasn't. But this book was crucial for me when I was growing up. As a Native American child who wore glasses and lived in a predominantly white community, I connected to this book on a level that I don't think anyone around me could. And I think it's important to know that the themes that are in this book, there's a lot of sexual themes, there's a lot of racial themes, a lot of things that books that people want to ban talk about. Sorry, that was an odd sentence. I'm cold, I'm shivering. But I guess my main point is if you were to ban that book and I wasn't able to read that at such a crucial age, I believe I was 13 when I read that book for the first time, I wouldn't have turned into the person I am today. I wouldn't have realized that, oh, I can just assimilate and then I'll just be fine. I realized that I could be myself, my own Native American person. I can do my own things and not have to be a part of that community because I'm frankly not a part of that community. I'm an outlier. And by banning books, you allow people to be othered in that sense further because they don't have these people to relate to. And these people telling stories, they don't have an outlet to let people be heard. And I think that that is very important to have.
1 minute? We have 1 more minute we can use. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess I would also say that I think that when books and ideas are banned, that just makes them more popular. I think that when Mouse was banned, that they sold over 700,000 copies in the 24 hours after it was banned. So it's really almost a guarantee that it's going to be a bestseller when things are banned. And, you know, also there's there's also a prurient kind of curiosity. I think that I remember when I was in junior high school, one of Judy Blume's books was banned, and she was, because she wrote a lot about puberty and coming of age and adolescence, and she wrote an adult novel called Forever that had a sex scene in it, apparently, and so all of us junior high school kids were all passing it around because we knew that there was a sex scene in it. So often backfires, is the intent. Often backfires on the person who is the banner or challenger of the idea or the book.
And it's great to hear different perspectives. I love just really your encapsulating at the end that sometimes things like this boomerang where people may feel that it's happening for the greater good, in making sure that some people don't have access. And it happens again and again throughout history. We'll talk more, but let's go right to the other side. And we have with us then Professor Seeley from Criminal Justice, and we also have Eden Pela.
Good afternoon. As a lawyer, I strongly support the Constitution of the United States and the freedoms that it represents. For this reason, I could never advocate for total book bans like some of the ones that they have spoken about. But that does not mean that I do not support children having full, unfettered access to all books. Parents and child safety advocates frequently seek to remove books from school libraries and/or Common Core English curriculums. They do this out of concern that the children are not yet emotionally or intellectually prepared to process what they are reading. They are not prepared for books that expose them to graphic sexual material, books with violence, and books with excessive profanity. Research has long established that teenagers who are exposed to movies and/or music that glamorizes drinking, drugging, and violence tend to engage in those behaviors themselves. A study published in Psychological Science showed that the more teens are exposed to sexual content, the earlier they start having sex, and the more likely they are to engage in unprotected sex. Research has also shown that teenagers who listen to music with degrading sexual references are more likely to have sex at a younger age than teenagers who don't have that exposure. A study conducted by researcher Dr. Jennings Bryant revealed that more than 66% of boys and 40% of girls reported wanting to try sexual behaviors that they saw in the media. By the time they reached high school, many of these children had already tried those behaviors, thereby exposing them to unwanted pregnancies and sexually transmitted diseases. This is one of the reasons why movies, video games, and music have content ratings. Media in all its forms is a powerful influencer, and books are another form of media. Knowing that early exposure to sexual content can and frequently does have a significant impact on children's values, attitudes, and behaviors towards sex and relationships begs the question, why aren't we doing more to regulate the content of books? We can all agree that parents are expected to regulate the conduct of their children. They are responsible for teaching them manners, kindness, empathy, and respect. We expect parents to create boundaries for their children, and parents legitimately get upset when others undermine the boundaries that they have set. One area in which a parent regulates the conduct of their children involves media, movies, videos, games, music, and yes, books. Parents, as part of their responsibility of raising a child, have the right to decide what material their children are exposed to and when. When school libraries give children access to books with adult content, this undermines parental authority. It is the parents who are in the best position to know if the child is mature enough to process certain material. If a parent is allowed to say, no, my child cannot see that movie, that R-rated movie because it has graphic sexual content, then they should also be able to say the same about a book that has that same sexual graphic content. It is intellectually inconsistent to say that it is not okay for a 10-year-old child to watch a graphic sexual content in a movie theater, but turn around and say it is okay for them to read that same sexual graphic content in a book. Recently, I read a fascinating conversation between an author and a K-5 school librarian. The author had published a book, and the K-5 librarian had admittedly said that she was not going to put this book in her K-5 library. She deemed it too mature. One of the things that the librarian pointed out was the difference between what happens in a school library versus what happens in a public library. The librarian pointed out what parents already know. She said, when I take my son to the public library, I bring him to look around, and when we go to check out, I look and see what books he's bringing home before he can start to read them. When he gets a book from the school library, he starts reading it before he brings it home, before I even see it. The librarian observed the same thing in her own school library, with students getting their books and starting to read them right away before their parents ever had a chance to check their content. This same librarian made a very compelling point regarding the rise of anxiety disorders in 4th and 5th graders. Regardless of the cause of these anxiety disorders, children are up at night crying and worrying about all kinds of things. She referenced children who had read The Hunger Games without their parents' approval at school and then cried for days with nightmares. Another parent confided that they had stopped buying I Survived books for their son because he became terrified that a natural disaster was going to hit at any minute. How is it possible for a school librarian to determine what will or won't upset someone's child? 4th and 5th graders are fragile. How is it? Young adult books often contain adult themes that many people simply aren't mentally or intellectually capable of processing. This is highlighted by the fact that the American Academic of Pediatrics has found that exposure to violence in media, including books, can impact kids, making them act aggressively and desensitizing them to violence. Parents want to know when they are sending their children to school that the children are going to be safe. Ratings on books would aid both parents and librarians in determining what is appropriate for children. Some say it would be too difficult to rate books because there are so many more books than there are movies, but we must remember the movie industry, fearing the government would impose regulations on them if they did not do something, created their own regulation system, and that system includes parents on the board determining the ratings of those movies. There is no reason why publishers working together cannot come up with a similar regulatory process. Books have just as much power over us as movies and music. Books are a form of entertainment, yet they are the only ones without content rating. Rating the content of books is the solution. It's not censorship, it's not book banning, it's information. Information that allows parents and librarians the ability to recognize what is appropriate for a 10-year-old child and what is not. Thank you.
I'm the time monger. All right. And I know it can be nerve-wracking, but those are the rules. They are the rules of the game. I know. Part of me would rather be in front of you so that it isn't as detrimental, but we're rolling with what we can do. All right, continuing on, that perhaps that you are for the resolution. Let's hear now from Eden.
As I stand here before you today, students, faculty, and community members, I cannot in full honesty say that I am for the absolute censorship of free speech and thought, as that is against the very foundation of the United States itself. As a creative writing major, I fully recognize that books are an avenue to the full exploration of the mind and the key to literary imagination. I value their importance as they have served me well in my passion for education in the literary world. Although there is a certain time where some thoughts, beliefs, and concepts should be introduced, and that is where book regulations come in. If we censor our children from watching 50 Shades of Grey, A Clockwork Orange, American Psycho, or even hushing them from cussing, why should we not have that same censorship when it comes to books? As movies are a visual representation of literary art in its own organic form should be regulated for people depending on their age and level of maturity. The Katy Independent School District in Texas has banned books from its curriculum, including Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale, The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky, and John Green's Looking for Alaska. Note that all these critically acclaimed and worthily appraised books are staple works of literary brilliance and deserve to be discussed. But at what age do we introduce them to our young students? The Handmaid's Tale is about a totalitarian religious community sexually assaulting fertile women to sleep with elite women's husbands and bear their children, stripping them of their identity and womanhood. In Green's Looking for Alaska, some scenes include literary images of smoking weed and drunken intercourse. Chbosky's The Perks of Being a Wallflower, recommended for 14-year-olds by Amazon itself, focuses on the main character and how he faces being sexually molested by his aunt as a child, as well as his female friend being molested by her father's best friend as a child. As these are all important and vital topics to be concerned about in our society, a child should not be reading about the graphicness of sexual assaults in these books going into such detail. Children are highly impressionable. Some other books pertaining to race, for instance, that have been challenged include Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye, following the life of an 11-year-old girl who was a victim of racism, rape, incest from her own father, and molestation. According to Plugged In, this book is recommended for ages 14 and up. I will read a paragraph from this book so you may listen to what exactly is approved for our young students, blurring out some of the words that may be a little too harsh for our current formal audience. Pages 188 read, "The little girls are the only things I'll miss. Do you know that when I touched their little T word and bit them just a little, I felt I was being friendly? If I'd been hurting them, wouldn't they have come back? They'd eat ice cream with their legs open while I played with them. It was like a party." High school teachers even mark these pages as things that can only be read at home and not in class. Perhaps this would convince you more why this book should not be in the hands of a 14-year-old. Recognizing how vile of a place the world can be, this is not the majority of the experience of all 14-year-olds in the class of all races. Therefore, how can we attend to those students in the class who have been affected this way and make them feel safe? By providing adequate counselors and facilities through the schools that the students can access, not by revisiting their trauma. A child, especially in our Western world, can only know themselves so much before contemplating such hard topics that even adults find hard to digest. Even some core religious texts, including the Bible and the Quran, have graphic scenes in which schools should regulate. Not every parent is going to want their child reading about Genesis chapter 9, which highlights the dealings of Sodom and Gomorrah, mentioning how the people of the nation committed incest with one another, sleeping with their own mothers and sisters, as well as vile acts including rape. In the book of Surah in the Quran, it talks about killing infidels. Even though that may not be what the large population of Muslims believe in, it does cite that violence, which is not suitable for children, as well as including texts of hitting their wives before Allah if they be disobedient. This is a verse that can be taken largely out of context if not careful, and who better to misinterpret this than a child? That is why we have children's versions of the Bible and the Quran. These many concepts push children into learning too much too fast, making them overwhelmed and creating high diagnosis of mental health disorders, including ADHD. In the end, it is not for the schools to decide what hard concepts young children should be learning. It should be left for the parents and the familial household to determine whether or not a child is capable of handling such information because of how people mature differently. One child's capability is not the other, so we ask for regulation and neutrality from the school when dealing with such harsh concepts. Thank you.
Well, thank you to all four of you. with such different perspectives, because we got to hear the history behind why we have book banning, and maybe some of that history you found to be even a surprise at times. We got to hear some firsthand accounting of possibly what could have, would have, had you not been able to access a book that was integral in your own growth, and to really think about whether or not access is the issue and whose role it is. And contrary to that, to really think about it in the perspective of a school, what a school library intended for youngsters and how it differs from that of a public library. What is the role of the school? Whose responsibility is it to ensure that students are in a safe environment and perhaps not exposed? And even hearing perhaps a graphic example, some of the legal perspectives, and such a different, 4 different perspectives. I tasked you all at the beginning of this to think about where you stand. Does the banning of books affect us in an intellectual way? And I'm wondering if, based on what you just heard, 2 people for and 2 people against, have any of your opinions swayed already, even slightly? If so, raise your hands. Is there anything that you heard where you thought, maybe I hadn't exactly thought of it that way? All right, and therein lies the beauty of a debate, and therein lies the beauty of having a persuasive discussion like this. I'm hoping that, you could join us in some commentary now, perhaps a challenge, perhaps something that you want clarified. And in the same light, in a debate, normally we would go into a cross-examination section, which would allow people from both sides to challenge one another or to respond to some of the things that they heard. So I'd sort of like to do that round robin and maybe perhaps hear something from the floor and hear something from one of you, and then go to the floor and hear something from you and see what we can do. So is there anybody that is willing to sort of kick off this conversation and either make an observation or a challenge or a question from our audience? Don't hesitate. Marina, thank you.
I
Okay.
think we need the mic on for the audience.
Oh, yeah, no, okay. So it was a very, very interesting point of view. But my question for Professor Steele and Eden is, where do you stand when a book such as 1984 from Harwell is getting banned, and it gets such a strong point of view on what I think we are currently living? Because, that book, as of now, feels so much as a reality. So in that sense, when we're not talking maybe about such, graphic violence, sexual theme, but we're talking about something bigger, such as power, what do you stand for in that sense?
Again, I don't stand for banning books in their entirety, but I do think that even issues of power and egalitarianism and we can take it further into other books and talk about how these are interpreted, right, by different people in different ways and can be teaching tools. But we teach different messages at different ages, right? We are not talking to second graders about 1984. And that is truly where Eden and I came in. Like when she came to me last week and asked me if I would participate in this, my concern is how do I participate in a debate where I'm supposedly arguing for banning books when I fundamentally do not believe in it, and neither does she. Our issue came truly down to making sure that the content was appropriate for the person who is reading it, that they have the emotional and intellectual maturity to handle the topic. And I agree with you, when there are topics of such important significance, you don't want a child just getting this book out of the library and going into their room and reading it and not being able to understand the content and process it. It is the kind of book that should be in a core curriculum at a particular age, and that discussion guided by the teachers and the parents.
Thank you. Do either of you have a response for some of the things that you heard from one another that you might challenge on the other side or ask for some clarification?
Yeah, I agree that the guidance of teachers and professionals, and I think that's something that's sort of fallen through the cracks a little bit in this discussion when we talk about either removing books from libraries or from curriculum, that parents can very easily be triggered by the moral panic. Fear that, a book that has sexual content will somehow enlighten students or enlighten young people to have sex as if they wouldn't have sex anyway. I find that to be kind of a dubious point. And I think we have to entrust school boards, teachers, and librarians as professionals to select curriculum, select materials that are going to move our students forward. No one chooses books for class that are intentionally traumatizing. I think that it's a little disingenuous in that respect to make that argument. I would also point to things that are G-rated in the films. Like, I was thinking of some of the Disney films that people watch, like Dumbo and Bambi, and some of those films that also could be are kind of basic standard children's fare that we show to very small children that are extremely violent and traumatizing. For example, when Bambi's mother's killed right in front of Bambi, and Dumbo's mother is taken away from him, and those kinds of things that are equally as traumatizing. So I find that there are example by example. I think that it's something that is maybe a utopian vision of trying to protect children that maybe isn't real and isn't realistic. I think that children are going to grow up, even if we don't want them to grow up and be different from us or have different views or have sex one day, because it's part of being human, is something that we can't prevent. And to demonize books or to make books into something that's evil and dangerous and something to fear is kind of misplacing that idea.
Sure.
No. I think it's also important to note that above everything, movies, TV, books, and everything, I think the advent of the internet is also making all of this much more available to children. We see, anywhere we go, we see children with iPads shoved in their faces, and I mean, usually they have some sort of parental control, but kids have phones at such young ages now. I didn't have one until I was 13, so I'm kind of an outlier, but I know kids that are like 8 and 9 years old with iPhones, and they can look up whatever they want. And they're going to get access to these things before they read books about them, and I think it's important to note that no matter what anyone tries to do, kids are going to find a way to view something and kind of put it in their own perspective as soon as they can. And yeah.
Exactly. Do you have a challenge or a question or a clarification?
So, not a question, but a reply to what you said. You said that children are going to have sex anyways. I feel like the society that we are in has normalized that culture of like introducing children into sexual activity so early that it has become so normal that introducing them to these books, has become a kind of like normalcy in our culture. And I don't think that that is right, and I feel like pushing them more into reading these books and exposing them to a lot more graphicness aside from what they see online is pushing them a lot deeper into that culture. And I remember you mentioning, I think it was the Bambi movie, whether it was Bambi or Dumbo or whether it was both of them, and you referred to that as traumatizing. I find that difficult to discern when you compare that to something like The Bluest Eye or something like The Handmaid's Tale, for instance. Those are a lot more graphic than Bambi losing her mother let's say Dumbo got lost at a circus or something. They are a lot more graphic when you compare them to those other movies or to those other kinds of content. Yeah, did you want to respond?
That's G-rated. So the Disneyfication of those incidents that was already approved for children. So I think that the question is who's going to have the power? Who has the power and who gets to be the arbiter of what is appropriate and what isn't? I think is a very dangerous question to be able to say this gets burned in a pile, in a big book pile of burning ideas. I think it's a slippery slope that I think has to be very carefully discussed.
Yes.
I think that Eden's point was, when we're talking about Disney movies, they're clearly cartoons as opposed to graphic depictions of rape and incest. And that the fact that there is no caution, no regulatory words that this is not recommended for children under the age of such and such. Even if you walk around our campus, you see flyers about our stigma series and the presenters, and they have cautions on them that it could contain triggering content. And we're just asking that we have that same type of message when it comes to books that could have triggering content or material that children are not prepared to handle.
Exactly.
So going
And
off
we're going to
of,
go to the audience, I promise.
just going off of that, I think that Eden mentioned the perks of being a wallflower about a kid who gets molested by his uncle. I think that while these depictions of sexual abuse and they're all graphic, they're just as graphic when they happen in real life. And I think it's important that if somebody goes through something like that, that they realize that they're not alone in that situation. This sort of thing happens to anybody, and there never is a warning for it. And while I'm kind of comparing it in a not very good way, I just think that, I think books should have a trigger warning in that sense, where it's like, all right, if you know going in that it's going to be like that, okay, it's important to know. But even still, if a book doesn't have that and it does go into these graphic situations, then I think that much like real life, they just happen without our control. And I think that that's just how life works. We talk about violence and things we see in books, and we look at the world around us and we see that it's just as, if not more, violent. And I think that shielding people from that, regardless of their age, is pretty detrimental to anyone's point of view.
Yes. Anyone out here? I know Marina, but that's good. Only because it's about hearing voices, so I'd like to hear as many voices
This
as
is
we
the
can.
first time that I speak in a microphone? Okay. First, really great point of views. I'm actually very debating myself. I came here because I'm very interested in the topic. And hearing both of your sides made me really think through this thing. And so I just have, I would say, one thought more than a question. I am wondering, with the banning of certain books, I am kind of afraid that we are gonna fall in a category of taboos, which is I think, as is for my culture, I'm Italian, and I think taboos have been I don't know, I think I see them as a negative aspect because people get censored, so that you cannot speak about something, you cannot think about something, and thinking that kids are gonna be raised thinking that something is a taboo, so something that is not supposed to be talked about because it's not the right age. I am wondering if this is gonna be a good thing in their development as human beings, while for instance, knowing that these things happens because unfortunately life happens, and being able to process it, having certain critical thinking since when they're very young. So being able maybe to teach them how to develop very high critical thinking since a very young age, that might be helpful for them to process certain topics and certain like uncomfortable topics like in a better way, maybe. That was just my thought.
Do you agree that those conversations should be monitored and in participation with the family as opposed to in a school library where the parent doesn't even know they're reading that material?
Well, yeah, that's a very good point, actually. Yeah, I think definitely the family should definitely be involved in that. And as parents, we should be able to like make some decision, which is like this why some of the thoughts fall in your category. And yeah, I do agree with that. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we need to be mindful of the fact that some schools are simply K-4, K-5, and then some towns have junior high and then other high school. And depending on the size of the community, they can all be housed in one place and have a single library, where it would be a lot easier to separate those, based on content, depending on the size and the financial resources that a particular community has. It just may not be available to others. So, any other thoughts from the floor? Sasha?
It's going up now. Yeah, that's fine. Hi, thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity to hear both sides of this topic. I cannot just stop thinking about the sexual content has been mostly the biggest topic that you guys have talked about like rating and like, if ban or not ban. But there are other highly important points of view related to violence. I'm not saying that raping and all that kind of situations that happens in books are not violence, but there are all other big areas of graphic violence in different ways in other books that has not been addressed. And it comes to my mind this analyzing this topic in a little bit more depth. And I think that when we are banning books or rating books in a way, we're also taking away the option of understanding and like being exposed to something that might be shocking. The idea is to move you, right? That's what we're doing when we're reading something. And even though there's these concerns, and I don't remember how Professor here addressed it, like the social panic, I think it was. I think that, and as a parent, I think that that's very important for me to also be able to guide my child in the future, but I want my child to have the option to see and to hear, and I'll be the one that says, well, this, you have to understand it from this frame, because this is what the book is saying, right? I think that banning books, in a sense, it's taking us away from that possibility, right, of doing that action. And yeah, basically that's what I wanted to share, something.
Due to time, we did have to limit some of the things that we spoke about. We did mention the Hunger Games, because the Hunger Games is one that stands out specifically to me. Children being forced to murder other children in order to survive themselves. And I am a pseudo-parent. I have a child that lives with me and was shocked at the age that this book was listed as a suggested reading for her to write a book report on based on the content of it. Fortunately, there were other books that were less violent that were also on the list, and we spoke about it, and she chose one of those other books. It's 3 years later, and she's now allowed to read The Hunger Games. But at the age that it was being suggested for her, in my opinion, as the parental figure, she was not emotionally prepared to handle the concept of children murdering other children in order to survive themselves.
Thank you. I'm really grateful that you, as a parent, as a mother there, were behind that reading, so you could guide that understanding from where the book is coming from. So that's what I want to do in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm really happy that we're maybe going to kind of come around to this, because I think that instead of forbidding or censoring, I think that we should be talking. And that I thought about this when I was, preparing the remarks today about things like To Kill a Mockingbird being criticized because it didn't have an authentic Black voice in it. And so instead of eliminating it from curriculum, add something that has the Black voice in it. And instead of it being an or, be an and, right? Add the thing, or have the conversation with your child about the story, right? These are stories. And, like you said, this is art. These are things with literary merit, and are supposed to move us, are supposed to get us to react and to think and to feel. And, to cry even, you read things and you're so moved by what the character is experiencing. That's part of being alive. And by getting rid of that and cutting or censoring or banning things, we're depriving people of fully enjoying being alive. It's part of the human experience to enjoy these things, even if they are at times painful. Even if they are at times unpleasant. That is part of being human. And so I think that, one of the things that, Kai and I actually wanted to interject that we maybe didn't get to emphasize enough was that a lot of the panic around some of these recent spike in bannings had to do with content that was LGBT to deprive people of being able to relate to those stories and how damaging that is to young people, to people who are trying to explore who they are. So that, on one end of the spectrum there could be protection, but there's also damage and harm that can come from this too.
Raj? Yeah, just a quick comment. Thank you, this was great. I just had two comments. One is the young lady was talking about taboos, right? So I'm from India, and the one thing I remember so clearly, when I was middle school, my brothers, I have two older brothers, they were reading The Godfather. Remember the book, The Godfather? And I was lying there one day, and I took it, and I started reading it, just like. And my father said, no, you don't read that book. I'm like, why? If they can read it, why not I? I was still middle school. There were high school. There was a little difference. But when I got to high school, I said, Dad, I want to read that book. He said, no, you're not ready for that book. I understand everything we heard today, right? Parental, there was a gender thing. Somehow we girls are considered, nurtured, protected, something. And I never got to read that book. But what you said, Jane, I was like, what is in that book that I shouldn't read? I want to find that out. And my dad was a great dad. I loved us to explore independence, all of that. And I remember telling him, I was a freshman in college, I said, Daddy, can you just give me that book now? I want to read it. And I remember my father saying, okay, read it, go read it. And as I began to read it, there were so many things I didn't understand, even as a freshman. Not today's freshmen. Today's freshmen know everything, right? But not when I was a freshman. That was just a gender, cultural experience. But the other thing I just want to say, like this afternoon at 1:30, my psychology class is discussing psychological disorders. We're starting the chapter, going back to this whole thing of what is it we should teach? You know, all our disciplines, many faculty here today, thank you so much. We all teach very sensitive academic disciplines, and the books we choose in criminal justice, reading, history, all of us, we go through this process of looking for books that are good for this, for our students, right? We have all these wonderful people in our classes, and I always tell to my psychology, all of us, when we are having the discussion as a team, we are nearly 15 professors in the department, we'll go back to that page. You see how they write that? That is too raw, that is not academia. Yes, we must know the truth, Jane, absolutely, right? But how do we then do it professionally, academically, in a learning environment? There are so many factors that come into the process of picking that book, and I told my students last week, as you prepare for today's class, I sent them a line even yesterday morning. It's going to be an intense discussion. Our classes are in general, but this is such a hard topic even to teach. So as you're preparing, as you're writing that outline, brace up. This is going to hit a raw nerve in some of your lives. So, but remember, this is college psychology. We have to discuss human behavior, human emotions, and we have to teach you this. It's going to be a little unpleasant here and there. And you know, I have 7 students who are dual enrollment from the high school. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Thank you so much, everyone.
I just wanted to reply to what Professor Shemeka said before Dr. Raj came up. So again, we are not advocating for the full banning of books. We do not like the concept of banning thoughts and banning ideologies and banning these concepts because they are important to talk about. But at what age do you introduce them? You keep mentioning the term people instead of children. When you say people, it generalizes everybody. You cannot generalize everybody when you talk about these harsh concepts. You can't introduce the topic of rape to a 5-year-old or to a 6-year-old or to an 8-year-old. Yes, it happens, and the world is a very vile place. It might have, God forbid, happened to them, but to the other children of that age, you cannot introduce such harsh concepts to them. And to the ones that it has happened to, that is when you provide adequate resources for them to be able to seek help. And not just that, what else do I want to say? Yeah, there are some graphic materials in some books pertaining to not just race, but also with the LGBTQ plus community that are not advisable for people around that, young adolescent age of let's say 8 and 10. For instance, the book Genderqueer, I think that book is very, very, graphically artistic, yes, but an 8-year-old should not be reading pages. I actually took a picture of them, a bunch of them actually. Hold on, give me 1 second. Pages 168, which shows graphic image, which kind of reveals graphic images of the character giving a B job to another character, as well as pages, what's that page again? Yeah, as well as pages 62, describing the sexual activity with also graphic images of 2 men sleeping with each other on top and talking about the process of masturbation. I don't think this is appropriate for someone that is 11 or 12 years old, even though they might be, after puberty and leaning into that part of their gender, because of course, it's after puberty, they might be starting to discover themselves, yes, but not with such graphic images.
You make a strong point, and I think part of the conflict here is, as you said, given A, the amount of time that both of you had, and B, there's almost 2 different debates happening here. All right, one is about content and freedom of expression, and the other is really about distinguishing between age. All right, and the arbiters of what is and isn't right, understanding at the same time that oftentimes parents really aren't equipped to even have the discussion, that that there are lots of people who send their kids off to school with the expectation that they'll get what they need. They're not ready themselves. And so we're almost as if we're having two debates. I think we have, is our timeline to end at 1?
I think we're ready to wrap it up. I just want to say one thing. And in this sense, I want to defend Professor Shemeka with my experience. So I know what you're exactly saying. And when I was probably 10, I must have been 10, I started reading 50 Shades of Grey. I started reading Looking for Alaska. And in this sense, I know that there are some scenes that are pretty strong, okay? But those books were going around among my friends. And my friends passed this book to me. Now, I have to be honest. At that time, when I was reading, I was a little shocked. But also very, very curious. And I didn't feel like talking to my mom about the topics. I wanted to discover by myself. Maybe, like for a girl, it's different when we're 10, when we're 12, maybe from a boy. But what I'm trying to say here is that I think that coming to an age, regardless of what age you're talking, 5, 6, or 10, it's different from having human being, and we have different experiences. So when we are exposed to Bambi and we're 5 or 6, the same way we're probably exposed to when we're 10, to a book such as Finding Alaska. I'm sorry, I can't remember the title. It's something that affects us in a different way. It also, I want to say, also depends on the context, because I was taught from my parents, at a very young age, what is a safe sex? Because my parents knew that my friends were talking about sex, and it was important for me to know what it was and how safe should it be. In the same way that my mom was telling me, do not smoke because this is bad for you. So when I was reading in this book, I wouldn't feel the attraction to do such a thing, but I wanted to know more about and what was happening in that context. So I feel that when you talk about coming to an age, I know it's a very, very sensitive topic because I know it's hard, but I stand on my point of view, and I heard also your point of view as a mother, because I am not a mother, so I think I'm saying something as, my own person, me being with a child to grow up, as well as Sasha. But what I'm saying here is that a 5 years old or 6 years old, also from personal experience, it's a home person. And I think that according to what it feels like, it should be, yes, exposed to certain things, because life, especially nowadays, lets those things to him naturally. And so I personally rather myself have this child to read it on the book and come to me and question the school, question me, rather than finding out on TikTok and say, oh my God, what is this? What is happening? So that's all I wanted to say. I know we have to wrap it up, but thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm not sure how you're feeling. I think that it's wonderful, again, to have conversations like this. It's part of being in a place where higher education exists. In this forum, again, we agreed to disagree. If this were a formal debate, I'm going to say this was a debate/conversation, which is fine, and we were to vote. I asked you where you stood. I asked you midway, are you feeling any differently? Did any of you, if we had to, and normally in a debate, someone wins. And, we don't like that. It's really non-Brookdale-ese, all right? We don't like red pens, and we don't like to make anything, ahead of others. Those of us who are old school Brookdale. If you had to vote, though, who would you say, which side do you think won this debate? And do you want to answer that question? If you had to answer, how many of you would say that on this side they won the debate? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. How many would say on this side they won the debate? 1, 2. How many are undecided? That's the only other option. Okay, there's only 3 options here. Well, based on this very, very tiny straw poll, I don't know, Jane, you'll have to tell me statistically, I would have to say that you won the debate. All right, no. But I think our biggest takeaway is that conversations like this need to continue, that we need to play active roles, that we need to be part of deciding what is and isn't okay. And some of you may be teachers yourselves, some of you may have children later in life yourselves, and you'll have something, a foundation now to help you to decide what is and isn't okay for younger people, because that was a big part of today's message. I want to thank both of you for your preparation, and both of you for your preparation, and for agreeing to be a part of something at a college where it's so very difficult sometimes to get people to come together. This concludes our debate. I believe we have some good things. Yes, go ahead, Raj. Oops.
It's just like a formality, like, we want to, I'm very close to the mic. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. And I am the advisor for the Global Citizenship Distinction Program. So proud of Marina and Eden and Sergio just left. It's a very small group of students, and we're asking all the other students here to join us, spread the word around. But let me just quickly say a very warm thank you, first to Professor Barron for being an excellent moderator. It's a very hard job to do. It's not an easy job, and she spared me the agony. She was great. And Patrick has stepped out, but thanks to the Wellness Center for giving us this beautiful space. It's very new. Did you guys like it here? It's wonderful, right? So Gina, Jan, all you guys, the Wellness Center, thank you. And I'm so happy that my colleagues, Professor Skimeka, Barbara, and Jackie all joined. You were great. You got all these people together. I didn't do anything. And I was telling Dr. Thomas, how cool is it that we have 3 professors on the panel doing the whole thing. So you actually outnumbered the students, right? And that was great. And thank you. So many of my friends are here. Thank you so much. And I wanted to thank Kai and Eden for their brilliant, I think, just the insights, right? You see they speak with passion. That was wonderful. It was not like a prepared script. And TV, Sergio at the back, Nate, all of you for your TV coverage, college relations, Gina, Shauna, Laura couldn't come, she said. And my wonderful Dr. Thomas and International Center for all their help. And Marina, this was great. I know you lifted a lot of weight, and you couldn't do it without her, right? So that's wonderful. We are supposed to get food. I don't know if it has come. So we are thanking Student Life for pizza, I think they're sending us, or it has come. Thank you, everyone. And please talk to us about GCD. Would love to see you there. Thank you.